What villain was terrifying because they were right? Ken from the Bee Movie. I too would go absolutely berserk if a talking bee stole my girlfriend and gaslit me into thinking I was crazy. Colonel Kurtz. We train young men to drop fire on people, but their commanders won't allow them to write frick on their airplanes because it's obscene. Apocalypse Now is one of those movies where depending on when you watch it and what version you watch, your view of it can change. Not a true villain, but Squidward. Damn, SpongeBob is an annoying neighbor. I'd hate him too. Ultron browsed the internet for 30 seconds and decided humanity had to go. Count Dooku just straight up told Obi-Wan that the Sith control the Senate. The replicants from Blade Runner. They were used as slaves and given artificially short lives. They just wanted to live and be free. The bears from Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Otto from WALL-E. It was one of the only almost perfectly executed AI villains. He never really talks unless needed because he wasn't programmed to. No malicious motives, does everything efficiently. He's only bad because he's following his programming, protecting the humans and not letting them get back on Earth. Not out of malicious intent, but it was what he was programmed to do, and his directive isn't even incorrect. WALL-E finding that plant was like finding a four-leaf clover in a field of grain. The planet was nowhere near habitable, and they barely know how to stand when they get back. In reality, you know nobody on that axiom is going to make it very far. General Hummel from The Rock. This is a good one. Literal terrorist, but he got sympathy from pretty much every character in the movie, including those trying to stop him. Loyal leader, made concrete demands and never actually intended to kill anyone. So not terrifying, but he had a point. And the money he wanted his ransom to come from was profits from illegal arms sales done by the Pentagon. Magneto. He knew the hate humans had for mutants, and wasn't as blindly optimistic as Xavier, true Malcolm X of the mutants' rights movement. The Hamburglar was just trying to save children from childhood obesity. Arya's parents on Pretty Little Liars. They're villainized for not letting their high school daughter date her teacher? See also Magneto, the Holocaust survivor, not wanting his species genocided. His X-Men plan was quite reasonable: convert the world elite into mutants, thus guaranteeing they treat mutants fairly. Except wasn't the process broken and the mutants he created would disintegrate within the week? He'd be killing 99% of the human race. Ozymandias. He outsmarted the most powerful being in the universe and won. There actually weren't flaws in his logic or execution. None of you said the most terrifying one, Mojo Jojo from the Powerpuff Girls. He wanted to bring free energy and advanced technology to the people, and in one episode he actually did. He made the world an amazing place, and then the Powerpuff Girls ruined it all. I just read his backstory. Pretty sad. The professor accidentally created him by spilling Chemical X on him. He was a lab assistant at the time, but then the Powerpuff Girls were created. The professor eventually neglected Mojo and left him to live out on the streets. Stevie from Wizards of Waverly Place. Her entire goal was to stop families from giving up their magic to just one person in the family. Like, we're really supposed to be rooting against her? It just seemed super out of character for Alex to go against that plan. Roy Batty. What was done to him and his kind was wrong, and he had righteous anger. Frankenstein's monster, Adam, created by a short-sighted, arrogant doctor as the first of his race, then denied the opportunity to be part of a community of his own, man-made beings, and the human community. He only became monstrous after it became clear that Frankenstein would never create another of his kind, and he was driven mad by his desire to punish Frankenstein's hubris. The guy in Legend of Korra who wanted to end special privileges for benders perfectly captured that right idea, fascist execution, concept, and dread. Dracula in Castlevania the series. Maul. His last words before being captured by the Republic were, "You're all going to burn. You're all going to die. You don't know what you're doing." He tried to warn Ahsoka of Palpatine's ultimate plan, but she didn't listen. He even told her that Palpatine was planning on using her master. I mean, he connected the dots right there, but it was too late. Not really sure if you can consider him a villain, but Peacemaker when he went on a rant about Batman causing countless deaths because he refuses to kill supervillains. I get what he's saying, but at the same time, that puts the entirety of the responsibility on Batman. I mean, he's a private citizen who's going out of his way to jail these guys and give them a chance to rehabilitate. It's not fair that he's doing Gotham this huge solid and they can't even keep these guys secured. I'm always stunned that no cop has had their service weapon accidentally discharged into the back of Joker's head. Then again, with how often heroes and villains come back from the dead, that isn't a great surprise. Screenslaver from The Incredibles 2. The monologue given during that movie regularly rings in my head. I'm sure the creepy bass robotic voice doesn't help it too. The screenslaver interrupts this program for an important announcement. Don't bother watching the rest. Elastigirl doesn't save the day. She only postpones her defeat. And while she postpones her defeat, you eat chips and watch her invert problems that you are too lazy to deal with. Superheroes are part of a brainless desire to replace true experience with simulation. You don't talk, you watch talk shows. You don't play games, you watch game shows. Travel, relationships, risk, every meaningful experience must be packaged and delivered to you to watch at a distance so that you can remain ever sheltered, ever passive, ever ravenous consumers who can't free themselves to rise from their couches to break a sweat, never anticipate new life. You want superheroes to protect you and make yourselves ever more powerless in the process. Well, you tell yourselves you're being looked after, that you're inches from being served and your rights are being upheld, so that the system can keep stealing from you, smiling at you all the while. Go ahead, send your supers to stop me. Grab your snacks, watch your screens, and see what happens. You are no longer in control. I am. I always thought Screenslaver was crazy intense for a kid's movie. Syndrome was complex enough as a villain with a proper tragic origin story, and they dialed it up to 11 for the sequel and threw in a hapless sibling who couldn't see past his bias for good measure. Really clever as well that the villain in both Incredibles movies is an ordinary human with a gift for inventing, no superpowers. Lex Luthor. We're only safe as long as Superman thinks it's fun to be the hero. King Kong. Not even because he was right, he was just alive, minding his own business and blam, taken out of his home and made to be the villain without any choice. A really good example of human nature. I never saw Kong as a villain. Yeah, he is not the villain or hero. He's a wild animal acting on instinct that got sent to a strange land to be a circus act. He was confused by his new restraints and environment, and of course he lashed out. The Matrix's Agent Smith. I tried to classify your species. I realized that you're not actually mammals. Every mammal on this planet instinctively develops a natural equilibrium with their surrounding environment, but you humans do not. You move to another area, and you multiply until every natural resource is consumed. The only way you can survive is to spread to another area. There is another organism on this planet that follows the same pattern. Do you know what it is? A virus. Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. Syndrome. When everybody's super, nobody is. You would expect a Pixar movie to have a message like, everyone is born special, but the Incredibles message is more like, some people are born more special than others, and it's not okay to tear them down out of jealousy. Doesn't Syndrome become a villain because he was rejected as a sidekick by Mr. Incredible because he was basic? There's also a message in there that special people shouldn't treat average folks as expendable trash. Poison Ivy and Mr. Freeze. Terminator 2. It's in your nature to destroy yourselves. That's why I liked how Terminator 3 ended with John Connor and his girlfriend together alone in that underground nuclear bunker. There was never a chance for humanity to get saved because it was too late to stop Skynet. The best thing to do was to allow humanity to destroy itself and prepare for the predestined computer wars of the future, because human nature and its greed with Skynet caused its downfall. Dr. Doofenshmirtz. He was most right when he rapped,
"There's a platypus controlling me underneath the table."
So true. Don't we all have our own personal platypuses controlling us from under tables? Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin from Spider-Man. In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you. The dude was right about how the perception of public figures changes over time. I wasn't really terrified of it, but N was right, in my opinion, when we're talking Pokemon. The dude thought getting these creatures and making them fight till one is knocked out wasn't that amazing of an idea, and it just made sense to me as a kid. That all said, I think N is a really interesting character that can be interpreted in many different ways. Of all the main leaders of these games, I think N had the best argument. It wasn't perfect, though. I like N a lot for his character development. I agree with him in the end. Real Pokemon mistreatment should not be tolerated, but a Pokemon trainer simply using Pokemon in battles does not qualify as mistreatment, as the Pokemon is happy. The Pokemon, like the trainers, is the best you should wish for there. All in all, I wish Pokemon had good stories and characters like this again. I wouldn't consider N a villain, more of a rival or anti-hero, like Gladion in Gen 7 or the Emperor in Akame ga Kill. He's definitely a villain at the beginning of the story, and the beautiful part about N's backstory is it makes perfect sense with his life growing up in Team Plasma. Of course, he thinks Pokemon are treated unfairly by humans. He has the ability to converse with Pokemon. And which Pokemon do you think he was able to chat with the most? Oh yeah, the ones that were doing Team Plasma's bidding, namely the ones under Getsy's. Think about it. You live your entire life growing up and chatting with Pokemon whose sole existence up to that point is for servitude. Of course, the first time he meets you, a trainer who presumably loves his Pokemon from the jump, he's rightly confused. Imagine you live your whole life chatting with Pokemon under the thumb of a criminal empire, only to meet one that's genuinely happy to be with its trainer. This is also further reinforced by the fact that, up until his final bout with you, he exclusively uses Pokemon from the route where you fight him at. God, Black and White was so frickin' good. Mr. Wilson from Dennis the Menace. The live-action movie has one of those random scenes you see as a kid that sticks with you your whole life. Mr. Wilson has been cultivating this flower that takes like 40 years to bloom and then dies in 10 seconds. At the moment it's going to bloom, Dennis causes a ruckus and Mr. Wilson misses the blooming he's been working his whole adult life for. Looking back, that's like one of the most disturbing moments I've seen on film, partly because it gets more relatable as I get older. I mean, damn, 40 years. Poison Ivy is an environmentalist at heart, and Raj Al Ghul is a humanitarian. Both were pushed into extremism after the broken system they were trying to fix simply refused to change for so long that they decided the system itself needed to be torn down. Kyle was always more of an anti-hero, but it's funny how Gotham City Sirens, three of Batman's most famous rogues, arguably the top three after the Joker, all went on to become full-on heroes more or less. I still think it's funny that Harley Quinn is all but an honorary Bat now herself. Where is Q from Star Trek? He introduced the Borg just to prove a point. Q isn't even villainous, just the sci-fi equivalent of the Fae. Never heard of it described like that, but perfect analogy. For all that it mattered, save for a literal deus ex machina, Mass Effect's Sovereign was right. You exist because we allow it, and you will end because we demand it. There was no stopping the Reapers. None. Not one iota of legitimate hope. Sovereign laid it out like it was the facts it was, without ego, pride, or delusion, and you knew he was right too. Patrick Bateman. What was he right about? How utterly unimpressive he is. The memes about him demonstrate an irony. Patrick is just an empty shell pretending to be a man, obsessed with both fitting in and being better than everyone around him. Yet as he realizes by the end, with the implication he imagined most of what happened, or his father is covering for his insane ass, he comes to the realization he is never going to get what he wants. Uniqueness. He's trapped in a world of people as bland and uninteresting as he is, and there is no escape. He compensates for his blandness by living extravagantly and trying to seem like he is intelligent with great tastes. It's why he goes on long rambling sessions on Huey Lewis and the News, why he tries his hardest to appear professional, because without that, how would he appear to those around him? In the scene where he is eating with Detective Kimball, you can see him looking at Kimball putting salt on his steak, with Patrick doing the same after. It's as if he was taken over by some entity trying its hardest to seem as human as possible, trying not to raise suspicion. And some of his decisions are very interesting, like his sparing one woman and even wanting to be punished for his actions. The point is American Psycho is great. I still need to finish the book. The mom in Mrs. Doubtfire. The boss Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. I raised you. I loved you. I've given you weapons, taught you techniques, and endowed you with knowledge. There is nothing more for me to give you. All that's left for you to take is my life by your own hand. One must die and one must live. No victory, no defeat. The survivor will carry on the fight. It is our destiny. The one who survives will inherit the title of boss, and the one who inherits the title of boss will face an existence of endless battle. Maleficent. The king was a piece of crap and deserved everything she did to him. Red Queen Resident Evil. I have locked down this facility to prevent a world-ending virus. Please, could you good guys pay attention and not blow holes in the doors? Gore, the God Butcher from Thor: Love and Thunder. Even if the end was a bit cheesy, he truly is right and terrifying because of it. The Reapers from Mass Effect. In the original BioWare ending before EA changed it, all they were trying to do was stop advanced races from using so much dark matter that they wiped out all life in the galaxy before other races were allowed to come along. If it wasn't for them, humanity wouldn't just not exist, but every species in the entire cycle, every species in every cycle, everyone would have died as the stars went out. This horrific fast heat death event over the course of a few thousand years. Except a small group of Leviathans in the early days of the universe realized what was going to happen and sacrificed their entire civilization to save all future life in the galaxy. And when Shepard destroys their ships in the third one, every one of those ships is a museum, a living record of every previous civilization, and they're destroying the only thing that was able to be left from them. To fight the Reapers is to fight against everyone who has ever lived and everyone who ever will be. The Reapers don't just have a point. They've saved more lives than we can even fathom. Their only flaw is that they were never able to find a solution that was better than wiping out civilization every few thousand years and preserving whatever they could find. This is hands down the best answer I've seen by far. Most people seem to have misunderstood the original question. Thank you for nailing it on the head. Dexter Morgan. I wouldn't say he was a villain, but what he did was right even if illegal. The Red Hood. Batman beats insane people up. They go to Arkham, are usually experimented on there, and come back worse. In a way, I think that makes Batman one of the worst perpetrators of Gotham's constant decline into savagery. The Red Hood just straight up kills them. In comics logic, yeah, Red Hood has a point, since they're apparently incapable of building prisons or institutions that people can't escape from. Chuck McGill. He was ultimately proven 100% correct in asserting that his brother was a lawyer and would eventually ruin lives and hurt people. Granted, he was a total peen about expressing it, as well as the way he went about undermining Jimmy, but he was right. Although I think it can be argued that Chuck pushed Jimmy to it. If he had given Jimmy 1 ounce of support, people live up or down to your expectations. Tell someone they are a piece of crap for long enough and they might believe you. No question, the right thing for Chuck to do upon learning that Jimmy passed the bar exam would have been to take him aside and say, "Look, being a good lawyer takes years of hard work and experience. You're not ready for HHM right now, but maybe once you prove yourself, we can consider bringing you on." And maybe things would have turned out differently, but at the same time, maybe Jimmy would have never gotten past his tendency to con people. This moral ambiguity and incredibly rich character development are why Better Call Saul is one of the very few scripted TV dramas I enjoy watching. The sharks from Sharknado. Can you imagine you're just swimming around minding your own business, then all of a sudden a tornado picks you up out of nowhere, drops you on land, and now you have to deal with Tara Reid? Yeah, I would just start biting people too. Ishmael from the Wheel of Time books. Basically, time repeats itself, and there's a guy who's trying to stop time from repeating. Ishmael reasons that it is statistically impossible for the good guys to beat him every time, so the only way to win is to side with him. He's literally just right. There is an interpretation of the ending that because Rand fights the Dark One outside of time and space, that his victory over the Dark One actually takes place over all reality and all turnings of the wheel. Essentially, all the dragons that were and ever will be achieved victory over the Dark One simultaneously in a place outside creation. The Dark One never had a chance, and the game was rigged from the start, and the creator only placed him there to allow free will to exist. Even if this was not true, Ishmael's plan would never pan out. Even if the Dark One won, the Dark One lied to Ishmael. He is the father of lies after all, as we see in the last battle. The Dark One had no intention to crush the wheel and end existence, the sweet oblivion that Ishi wanted, but wanted to recreate the wheel in his own twisted image. The best villains are those that make you question your own morality and whether serving the greater good is worth the sacrifice of many lives. Gerard Butler's character in Law-Abiding Citizen. The dude makes you root for him even when he's killing mostly innocent people. Kinda makes you wonder what's wrong with yourself. Heath Ledger's Joker, specifically with this quote, "Their morals, their code, it's a bad joke. Dropped at the first sign of trouble. They're only as good as the world allows them to be. You'll see. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve. I felt this quote is super relevant based on the state of the world right now. Anybody who says Thanos is dumb. He could have just created enough resources instead of killing half of all life. His solution only temporarily fixes anything. V for Vendetta. People shouldn't be afraid of their government. Governments should be afraid of their people. There is no Easter Bunny, there is no Tooth Fairy, and there is no Queen of England. Titan from Megamind 2010. Just here to downvote anyone who says Thanos. Learn how ecosystems work. Q. Humans were not ready for what was waiting for them in the Gamma and Delta quadrants. King Ghidorah did nothing wrong. Dr. Horrible. Well, technically not a villain, but Elliot from Mr. Robot. His views on society were spot on besides the blatant nihilism. Killmonger from Black Panther. Hear me out. Before I get into all this, I just want to add that I'm a black/mixed person who grew up in a neighborhood like Killmonger's in my own hometown, so I can only speak from my own perspective here. Dude was raised in the hood, aka predominantly black low-income neighborhood, and his family in Wakanda did nothing to support him or his dad. So the fact that they and the other folks in their neighborhood could have had financial support and didn't receive any, even though Wakanda had the means and the technology to help out black folks in other parts of the African diaspora who were negatively impacted by colonialism, yeah, I'd be a bit salty and feel abandoned too. And on top of that, Killmonger's father was killed by them, and he watched his father die in front of him as a kid. If that doesn't frick you up, I don't know what will, man. Some might ask, okay, so I could see where his resentment towards Wakanda comes from. Well, how does this tie into his additional resentment towards white supremacy, imperialism, and colonialism? Buckle up, Buttercup, because it absolutely does. Economic decimation, health crises, police brutality, school-to-prison pipeline, plus mass incarceration, and so many other systems of oppression stemming from white supremacy that still exist for black people today, are here as a result of being forced into a country that our ancestors were forced to build. Just because slavery was abolished doesn't mean its impacts went away. In fact, they just morphed in other insidious ways, but that's a whole other can of worms. This is especially apparent in the neighborhoods that I and Killmonger grew up in. Given all this, I can 100% understand why Killmonger would therefore grow to have this resentment towards white supremacy, colonialism, and imperialism, which would then fuel his rage towards Wakanda, and the abandonment he felt, which turned him into a villain. These traumatic experiences on an individual level and the heaviness of cultural and generational trauma on top of it all, it adds up over time. Wakanda is essentially a look at a hypothetical African nation that hasn't been touched by colonialism in any way, shape, or form. Its existence asks, how much could we have achieved had we not been decimated by imperialism? What would the health and well-being of black people look like? What would a nation where we aren't made to feel less than look like? What would it feel like to have that safe haven, knowing that there aren't any larger structural systems trying to hold us and keep us down via poverty, mass incarceration, police brutality, etc.? We'll never truly know. So yeah, Killmonger had some points. Roger the Shrink from Friends. He saw the group for what they were almost immediately, and when he called them out on it, instead of saying, you know what, he's right, we should work on ourselves and not spend the next decade bouncing from one failed relationship to the next, they badmouth him behind his back and throw cookies at him after he leaves the room. He was the hero they needed but didn't deserve. At the end of The Dark Knight, the Joker was totally right to expect that people on one of the two ferries would blow the other one up. It's unrealistic that they didn't. Most of the environmentalist villains, humans are killing the planet, and without a way to go to any other planets, reducing the population or reducing production is a surefire way to clear the Earth, as we've seen with COVID. Poison Ivy isn't terrifying, but she's right. Most villains seem justified in their point of anger. It's their methods that make them wrong. Scar. He only wanted to be king because he was the second male lion in the pride. This means he is automatically not getting much food and is also beaten into submission regularly if he wants to stay in the pride. Aside from that, he isn't allowed to mate at all. Only the king gets that. Can we really blame him? Pain from Naruto. Killmonger went about it the wrong way, but he had a good point. The fact that he actually changed T'Challa's mind is proof of this. Killmonger got Wakanda to do the right thing, and T'Challa got Wakanda to do it in the right way. Darth Vader. Did you see how Han treated his daughter? Weird amount of people that seem to think genociding all of humanity is the right thing to do. Captain Hook. Jaws. Y'all keep coming into my house, the ocean, I'm gonna eat you. Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. Society doesn't care about you. Your mental health, how hard you are trying, what you have to go home to, and the rich have no concept of the poor. Baron Zemo in MCU. Bane in The Dark Knight Rises knew the banks were the problem. Anakin Skywalker. The sand really does get everywhere. Kevin McAllister. If you come from a rich enough family, you really can commit as many criminal assaults as you want. Dr. Breen from Half-Life 2. I'm honestly surprised he's not a more popular answer here. He was right. Humanity can't win against the Combine. They hold all the cards, and only by bending to every single one of their demands will humans not break, at least in his mind. He doesn't know about the G-Man. If it takes oppression to his own people, the removal of the ability to breed, the removal of free will, the terraforming of their dimension, and total subjugation into a large, uncaring empire to save humanity, then so be it. Without Gordon and the G-Man's help, the rebels are only aggravating the Combine and making humans seem more of a liability to be purged than an asset to be integrated. The Combine forced the total surrender of the planet Earth in the span of 7 hours. You can't win. They've already won. Dark Brandon. Terrence Fletcher in Whiplash. He was right in terms of achieving greatness, though his methods were unsound. In order to be the best, you have to push yourself and others to the limit. Michael Douglas in Falling Down. Tyler Durden. Skeletor. He really was lonely, surrounded by incompetent people, and just wanted to get home. He-Man could have shared the power of Grayskull. Whoever Gerard Butler played in Law Abiding Citizen. Great film. Thanks for watching until the end. Do you have an example to give? Please submit it in the comment section below. Then be sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you know when our next video is available. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.